Picture the most talked about woman in Europe. Now put her in a palace of 700 rooms and give her 4 of them. Low, warm, ground floor rooms stuffed with red lacquer and white porcelain. And make every other person under that enormous roof, all several thousand of them, spend some part of every single day wondering what is happening inside those 4 rooms. Add a king who comes down to her twice a day by a hidden staircase. Add debts that would frighten a banking house. Lungs that are quietly failing at 34. A war beginning at the edges of the map. And a court where a raised eyebrow at the wrong moment can end a family for 3 generations. That's Versailles in 1756. The most magnificent address on earth and one of the most dangerous. A place where a woman could hold the second greatest power in France without holding any office at all, and where she could lose it over the way somebody else curtsied. We're going back there tonight. Not to the state apartments, not to the gold gates where the tour groups queue now. We're going below and behind, into the 4 rooms, on the wrong side of the doors where the servants stood. And before we go in, I have to stop and tell you something, because tonight's story is built on a real book, and the story of that book is almost better than anything written in it. Madame de Pompadour's chamber woman, her femme de chambre, the widow who slept in the little room beside hers, who saw her without rouge and without armour, year after year, was a woman called Madame du Hausset. And Madame du Hausset wrote things down, privately, badly, by her own admission. Scraps, evenings, half conversations, never meaning a single line of it for other eyes. Years after everyone in this story was dead or scattered, a bundle of her papers turned up in the house of Madame de Pompadour's brother, on a day when he happened to be burning papers by the basketful. The bundle was headed for the fire with the rest. A guest sitting at that fireside, a man named Sénac de Mailhan, asked if he might have it instead. The brother shrugged. Take it. That shrug is the only reason tonight's story exists. The pages were finally published in 1809, half a century after the nights they describe, when every person named in them was safely in a grave. A diary that was never meant to be read in the end by the whole world, but only after the world it described had ended. Everything in tonight's story that comes from her pages I will tell you as we go. You'll hear me say she wrote it down, and when I say that, it's real. The king's coffee, the cats and the dogs, the terrible January, all of it. But the eyes I'm going to lend you tonight are younger eyes. A girl of about 19, an undermaid of the wardrobe working at du Hausset's elbow, and she is a composite stitched together from the real girls in the household accounts, the ones the ledgers recorded by wage and by first name and history recorded not at all. The rooms are real, the dates are real, the words I quote are real. The girl is every girl whose name we lost. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still can't tell whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who enjoy hearing about the King of France standing over a spirit lamp at midnight, making his own coffee, probably badly, while half of Europe mobilizes for war. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. 6 o'clock in the morning, the last week of September 1756, and your fingers are too cold to feel the needle. You're sitting on a low stool in a service corridor on the ground floor of the Palace of Versailles, with a single tallow candle on the ledge beside you and a lady's sleeve ruffle spread across a cushion on your knees. The ruffle is Brussels lace, 3 tiers of it, fine as cobweb, and somewhere in the second tier there is a snagged thread no longer than your smallest fingernail, and your entire morning possibly your entire future, depends on making that snag disappear. The corridor smells of your own candle, which is tallow and stinks of burnt fat, and of the corridor's stones, which smell of cold and old water, and seeping under the door 2 feet away, of another world entirely, beeswax, orange blossom, coffee, and the dried rose and spice dust of potpourri sitting in porcelain vases that each cost more than your father earned in his life. That door is the back door of the wardrobe of Madame la Marquise de Pompadour. You are on the wrong side of it. You are always on the wrong side of it. That is your job. Your feet are in felt slippers, because leather soles click on marble, and clicking is forbidden in this wing before 8. The cold comes up through the felt anyway, through your stockings, into the bones of your ankles, and settles there for the day. You stopped mentioning the cold about a month after you arrived. Nobody mentions the cold. The greatest palace in Europe is, below stairs and before dawn, roughly as warm as a cellar, and everyone in it simply agrees not to say so. You rethread the needle on the 3rd try. Your breath fogs. You take the snagged thread on the point, ease it, gently, gently, the way you were taught, the way your mother was taught, back through the mesh, anchor it with 2 stitches finer than a hair, and bite the silk off close. You hold the ruffle up to the candle, turn it again. Nothing. No snag, no shadow, no evidence that any hand was ever here. The mend must be invisible, like the mender. That is the first rule of your work, and the woman who told it to you meant both halves equally. And then, directly above your head, through the ceiling, through the floor of the room over the wardrobe, a stair creaks. You go absolutely still. Not the great marble staircases. Those are 100 feet away and might as well be in another country. This is the little staircase, the private one, the narrow wooden one that runs down inside the wall from the king's own cabinets on the floor above and ends at a door in Madame's apartment that most of the 10,000 people at Versailles will never see, and that you see every single day of your life because somebody has to dust it. One creak, then silence. It could be a floorboard settling. It could be a valet. It could be the King of France in his dressing gown deciding to come down early. And when I say the King of France, I need you to understand what that means when you are 19 and holding a candle in a back corridor. This isn't a portrait on a coin. This is a large, heavy-shouldered, black-eyed man in late middle age who may at any moment open a door 8 feet from you. And if he does, the rules are exact. You rise, you turn your face to the wall, you do not look, you do not speak, you do not exist. You are furniture that breathes. If he speaks to you, he won't. You answer in as few words as ever made a sentence. Then he passes, and you go back to being a girl with cold ankles, and your heart hammers for a quarter of an hour. The stair does not creak again. You let your breath out slowly, fold the mended ruffle in tissue, and blow out the candle stub. Carefully, because that stub is money and will come back to that. And you carry the lace toward the door of the wardrobe as the palace above you begins, with the groan of 10,000 waking bodies, its enormous day. Welcome to Versailles in the autumn of 1756. Welcome to the 4 rooms. Your name is Marie. It's a safe name. Half the girls below stairs answer to it, which is exactly why we chose it. You're 19 years old, and you were born in a village outside Amiens, in Picardy, in a house with a dirt floor and 1 glazed window, of which your family was proud. Your mother made lace. Your grandmother made lace. From the age of 5 you sat at the lace pillow in the light of the good window, and by 12 your thread was finer than your mother's, and by 16 an aunt who scrubbed linen in the laundries of Versailles, a hard woman with red hands and exact opinions, wrote to say that the household of the Marquise de Pompadour wanted a girl who could mend fine lace without leaving a ghost in it, and that she had put your name forward, and that if you shamed her she would personally see you walked back to Amiens. That was 3 years ago. You have not shamed her yet. Every morning you wake up knowing precisely how much distance there is between yet and ever. You're paid 150 livres a year, plus your bed, plus your food, plus perquisites. And hold on to that word, perquisites, because it is the secret economy of this entire palace, and it will matter later. 150 livres. A Paris mason might see 300 in a good year. The pair of lace sleeve ruffles you mended this morning, just the lace, not the gown, would sell in the Rue Saint-Honoré for more than you will earn between now and your 23rd birthday. You did the arithmetic once sitting on your stool, and then you decided never to do it again, because the number made your hands sweat, and sweat marks silk. Your bed is in a garret under the roof of the north wing, 5 floors and one entire universe above the rooms where you work. You share it. The room, and, in the coldest months, sometimes the bed, because 2 bodies are warmer than one, with a girl called Nicole from Caen in Normandy, who is 22, has been at the palace 4 years and knows everything. Not book everything, corridor everything, which ushers can be joked with and which will report you, which staircase floods when it rains, what the Austrian ambassador's people pay for gossip, and why you must never, ever sell them any. Nicole talks the way other people breathe, and beneath the talk she's running quietly and constantly a small commercial empire, of which more shortly. But the person who owns your working life, who chose you, trained you, and can dismiss you with one sentence to the steward, is the woman waiting for you now on the other side of the wardrobe door, and you should meet her properly because she is the reason there is a story at all. Madame du Hausset is somewhere past 50. A widow from Champagne, born a gentlewoman. Poor gentry, the kind with a name and no money, which at Versailles is its own precise caste. She wears grey. She has a flat, calm, unhurried voice that has never once, in your 3 years, been raised. She sleeps in a closet of a room directly beside Madame's bedchamber, within call, with the door ajar. She is the one who is there at 3 in the morning when Madame cannot breathe for coughing, and at 8 when the chocolate comes in, and at midnight when the king wants his coffee. There are 2 femmes de chambre of her rank, but it is du Hausset the Marquise trusts, and everyone from the steward down to the boy who carries wood knows it. This morning she takes the mended ruffle from you at the door, holds it to the window light, grey dawn now, the candles being snuffed one by one down the room, and turns it, exactly as you did, looking for the ghost of the mend. She doesn't find it. You know she doesn't find it, because she gives it back to you to lay in the drawer, and says nothing at all. From Madame du Hausset, nothing at all is a wage. The wardrobe is your country. 2 rooms, floor to ceiling in walnut presses and drawers, every drawer papered, every press scented, holding more made cloth than your entire village will own in a century. Court gowns in silk from Lyon, each one built like architecture, boned and interlined, heavy as a saddle. 18, 20 pounds of gown, you've carried them, arms full, staggering, forbidden to let a hem so much as kiss the floor. Sacks and wrappers and morning gowns, fur-lined pelisses for the gallery in winter, because the gallery in winter is a road through open country. shoes by the 100 pair, heels of covered wood, none of them ever worn twice into rain, because Madame does not walk in rain. Madame is carried, and lace, drawers and drawers of lace, Brussels, Alençon, Argenton, blonde, which is your particular parish, your reason for existing here. You are the girl who mends. And when I say Madame has all this, I need you to understand what that means in 1756, because it is not vanity, or it is not only vanity. Dress here is armour and it is speech. The court reads a gown the way a lawyer reads a contract. The depth of a flounce, the newness of a silk, the question of whether the marquise appeared twice in the same brocade. These things are reported, discussed, sent by courier to Vienna and London in ambassadors' dispatches. I am not exaggerating. Actual ambassadors of actual empires wrote actual dispatches about this woman's clothes, because her clothes were read, correctly, as bulletins about her health, her purse, and her credit with the king. When you mend an invisible mend, you are not tidying. You are forging a document. 8 o'clock. The apartment wakes. You hear it waker the way a stable girl hears a stable. By layers. The shutters of the little gallery folded back by the footman with the sniff. He sniffs every third breath, winter and summer. You have never learned his reason. The bell for Madame's chocolate. The rumble, very faint, of the first carriages in the Cour Royale, ministers arriving for the day's work above. The dry rattle of Dr. Quenet's shutters directly overhead in the entresol. The doctor rises early, and the click of Mimi's claws on parquet. Mimi being Madame's little dog, who is walked by whichever of you she condescends to that morning, and who eats, by your private calculation, rather better than you do, and under all of it, through it, the house's own smell, the one you will carry in your nose to your grave, beeswax and wood smoke, coffee and chocolate, orange blossom water, the cold stone breath of the corridors, and far down beneath, never quite absent, the latrine and river smell of the great palace itself, which has too many people and too few drains, and has smelled this way, gloriously and disgracefully, since Louis XIV moved the court here in 1682. Perfume overwrought, Versailles in one breath. You could bottle it and label it. France, 1756. At 9:30, Madame's bell rings twice, which means the toilette, which means the whole machine engages. Let me tell you what you actually see, the first time each day you see her, because it is never what the engravings show. The engravings show the goddess, the mouth like a bow, the powdered hair, the impossible complexion. What you see at 9:30 is a small, slight woman of 34 in a white wrapper, sitting at a dressing table, unpainted, and unpainted she's pale in a way that has nothing to do with fashion, a greyish pallor with violet under the eyes, the pallor of someone who coughed in the night, and you know she coughed in the night because Duaussé was up with her, and you know Duaussé was up because the little pot of syrup came back empty. Her voice before noon is careful, husbanded, spent like money. She is beautiful, that's true, it survives everything, but it is beauty over exhaustion, laid on daily in front of witnesses, and watching the rouge go on. 2 bright, frank circles of it, the paint of her rank and her defiance. You understand something, the pamphlets in Paris never will. They think the paint is the lie. You, holding the pincushion, watching her assemble her face the way a soldier assembles a musket, know that the paint is the discipline. She catches your eye once in the glass. You've got too close with a pin, and instead of the frown you brace for, she moves her hand an inch so the pin can pass. That is all. That is the whole event. You will find you will remember it all day, and you will not be able to say why, except that in this palace, being seen at all is so rare that it lands like a coin in an empty cup. Because here is the truth of your station, and the sooner you swallow it, the longer you will last. The talk in these rooms flows as if you were not in them. Ministers, duchesses, the king himself, they say things in front of you, terrifying things, state things, tender things, because you do not count as a listener. Duhosset put it in one sentence, the sentence she later put in her notebook, the sentence that 50 years afterward would be printed and quoted and shivered at. And she said it to you flatly, your first month, while you both folded linen. The king and Madame speak before us, she said, as if we were cats or dogs. She said it without bitterness, which somehow made it worse. And then she said the second thing, the thing that was not bitter either, that was almost, you've never found the right word, almost professional. She said, they forget us, and they are wrong to, because a cat sees everything in the room, and a dog remembers everyone who kicked it. And paper, she said, smoothing the linen with the flat of her hand, paper remembers what the great deny. You didn't understand that last part, not then. You understood it 3 weeks later, on an evening in October, when you came to her closet door with a question about the morning's linen and found it ajar, and saw her at her little table with an inkstand and a case of papers, writing, fast, cramped, abbreviating, a woman getting something down before it cooled. And she looked up at you, not startled, and closed the case without hurry and said, the linen can wait until 6. And you said, yes, Madame d'Orsay, and you went away with your heart beating strangely, because servants do not write. Servants who write are servants who can testify. There is no law against it. There doesn't need to be. Everyone simply knows that a servant's memory is supposed to die with her wages. She writes anyway. In grey, calm, unraised voice secret, 2 doors from the most watched woman in Europe, she writes anyway. Remember that. It is the whole story, though you don't know it yet, because it was Duhosset's writing in the end that put the idea into you. Not that you decided anything so grand as I shall keep a diary. It happened the way most dangerous things happen, below stairs, sideways, by accident, out of thrift. It happened in the 2nd week of October, when the year's burn baskets were carried down, the wicker baskets where the apartment's dead paper goes, the wrapping papers and the spoiled bills and the franked covers of letters, all of it destined for the kitchen fires, and all of it, by ancient custom, picked over first by the servants, because paper is money too. Clean paper sells to the shops for wrapping, and that is a perquisite. And in the 2nd basket, under a ruined sheet of music, your hand found a book, a real bound book, quarto in marbled boards, with a water stain across one corner like a brown island. Inside, the first 30 pages were columns, an order book, someone's abandoned register from the porcelain works, dates and glaze numbers and the word seconds, spoiled in a clerk's hand. And after page 30, nothing. 140 blank leaves, good laid paper, wire lines in it like the wake of a boat, spoiled for the clerk by the stained corner and worth to any shop in the town of Versailles, perhaps 3 sous. You stood there in the basement passage with the basket's smell of dust and old ink around you, and you did not think of 3 sous. You thought, and you have wondered ever since what exactly moved in you, you thought of Duhosset at her little table, and of the sentence about paper, and you put the book under your apron against your stays, and you walked up 5 flights with it pressing on your ribs like a hand, and in the garret, while Nicole was still at supper, you hid it. Where you hid it matters, so look closely. Your one treasure from home is your lace pillow. The fat, hard, linen-covered drum on which lace is made, your grandmother's before you. A lace pillow is stuffed hard with chopped straw, and between the straw and the cover, on the underside, your grandmother. A woman who lived through 2 famines and trusted neither strong boxes nor God particularly. Long ago made a flat pocket, big enough for a folded pattern, or banknotes, or bread. Grandmother's pocket, your mother called it. Every lace-maker's pillow in Picardy has one, and no searcher who is not herself a lace-maker has ever found one. The book slid into it as if the pocket had been waiting 30 years for exactly this. And that night, by a candle end, in a hand you keep small out of instinct, you wrote your first line. It was not a confession or a philosophy. It was this. Monday. Mended the Point d'Angleterre. The stair creaked at 6 and it was nobody. Monsieur slept ill. It has begun to be cold. That's all a diary is, by the way. That's all de Hausset's was, not literature. Just a servant, refusing 1 line at a time to be a cat or a dog. You should know the rest of the household now, the recurring faces of your world, because there are only a handful, and by Christmas you will know their footsteps through a closed door. There is Monsieur Collin, Madame's steward, the man who carries her whole material existence in ledgers under his arm. A dry, stooped, endlessly tired man with steel spectacles and ink on the second knuckle of his right hand that no soap has touched in 20 years. Every sou of an income vaster than a province passes through his books, and every sou of a debt vaster still, and the arithmetic of that "hold on" is coming because it will genuinely amaze you. There is Dr. Quesnay, upstairs in the entresol, Madame's physician, 62 years old, square-faced, a farmer's son from the Ile-de-France who cut for the stone as a country surgeon before he ever saw a courtier, and who now lives 1 twisting staircase above the most fashionable rooms in Europe, and despises fashion with his whole flat, Norman-sounding voice. His rooms smell of tisines and old books. Strange men climb to him at odd hours, some of them famous, all of them loud, to argue about grain. About grain. You will get used to it. There is Nicole, whom you know. There is Madame de Hausset, whom you are beginning to know. There is Madame, and there is the King. And there is one more who comes and goes, Madame's younger brother, the Marquis de Marigny, director of the King's buildings at 30, a stocky, wary, sensible man who never wanted the title his sister's position bought him, who is mocked at court for being a bourgeois and knows it, and who is the only person alive who calls Madame by anything like her old name. When he visits, you hear laughter through the door that belongs to a Paris parlour of 20 years ago, 2 children of the Poisson family who ended up God knows how inside the machine of Versailles. Mark him. Marigny matters twice in this story, once this winter, and once terribly gently at the very end by a fireplace years from now. 8 or 9 faces. That's a life. Below stairs a world is never larger than that. Now, the candle ends because I promised, and because if you want to understand Versailles, really understand it, better than the ambassadors did, you must understand the second economy. The first economy is the visible one. The king pays, the treasury groans, the ledgers fill. The second economy is perquisites, and it works like this. By custom older than anyone can cite, a candle at Versailles once lit is never lit again. Whatever remains of it when the room is done, a third, a half, sometimes a nearly whole candle snuffed after 10 minutes because a door was opened and the evening moved elsewhere, belongs by right to the servants of that room. Wax candles, mind. White beeswax, the good ones, that burn clean and smell of honey and cost real money. A pound of them costs more than a labourer's day. The stubs are gathered every morning and sold, and the money is as much yours as your wages. Nicole is the wardrobe's candle mistress. She collects, she grades. Long stubs, short stubs, bent ones softened back straight against her palm, and once a week her Swiss comes to the service door. Her Swiss is a guard soldier from Fribourg, enormous, silent, the red of his uniform always freshly brushed. He carries the basket of stubs to a chandler in the town, who melts them into second candles for people who dine by Versailles wax without ever seeing Versailles. Nicole keeps the accounts in her head, pays out shares each Saturday, and banks her own in a stocking whose hiding place changes weekly. Her share in a good month comes to 8 or 9 livres. Set that against your wage, 12 livres and 10 sous a month. The stubs are nearly a second salary. She is saving, she told you once, lying in the dark, 90 livres so far, toward a shop in the town. Coffee and ribbons, she says. Coffee at the front, ribbons at the back, and no stairs anywhere in the building. And here is why I am telling you about candle ends, and it is not thrift. The stubs are a barometer. The wax burned in Madame's apartment rises and falls with Madame's fortunes. When a salon is full, when courtiers pack the little gallery of an evening, hoping for 2 minutes of her attention because 2 minutes of her attention has been known to make a man's career, the sconces blaze, and Nicole's basket fills, and the stocking grows. If the salon were ever to empty, if the crowd that warms itself at her fire ever decided altogether on some cold instinct that her sun was setting, you would read it in wax before you read it in words. Nobody would need to say a thing. The basket would simply come up light. Keep your eye on the basket, I mean it. Before this story is over, that basket of candle ends will tell you the truth about the human heart, more precisely than any memoir ever written. That is the shape of your kingdom by day, lace and ledgers, stubs and staircases. But the heart of the apartment, the room the whole palace would give an eye to see, is the little room where the king comes in the evening, and it is time you saw it properly, because you are one of perhaps a dozen living people who ever will. They call them the cabinets, small rooms, low ceilings, because Madame's apartment was carved out of what used to be a bathing suite and a stair hall in the old king's time, and small is the point. The staterooms upstairs are built to make a human being feel like an insect under glass. These rooms are built to make a king feel like a man. There is a room lined in winter velvet the colour of a ripe plum, and a room panelled in white and gold so freshly painted you can still catch the linseed under the perfume, and everywhere, on brackets, on chimney pieces, on little tables with legs like a deer's, the porcelain. White and blue celeste and rose, cups and vases, and a whole garden of porcelain flowers that are dusted petal by petal with a squirrel hairbrush. By you on Tuesdays, on a schedule Madame du Hostess keeps in her head, kneeling on a folded cloth so your knees leave no print in the pile of the carpet. And in the corner of the second room stands a little table that would not fetch 3 livres at a country fair if you didn't know what it was. A plain service table with a spirit lamp on it, a brass burner with a floating wick, and beside the lamp a small coffee pot, and a grinder, and a japanned canister of roasted beans from the islands. That is the King of France's coffee table. He makes his own coffee on it. himself, with his own hands. Duhose wrote that down, by the way. It's in the pages plainly, the way you'd note the weather. The king made his coffee himself of an evening in the little apartments and liked no one to do it for him. 50 years later, strangers reading her book in a printed edition would stop at that line, the way you stopped the first time you saw it happen. Because you have seen it happen. You are on the wrong side of the door, which by the mercy of architecture is sometimes the same as being in the room. The door stood a hand's breadth open for the heat. It was late October, and through the gap you watched the most absolute monarch in Christendom, a man whose levee that very morning had required 40 people, a man who is dressed by dukes, a man whose dinner is a public performance watched by anyone with a hat and a sword. Measure beans into a grinder like a Marseille shop boy, and turn the handle with 2 fingers, frowning slightly, while the lamp flame ticked and swayed, and the smell of it drifted out to you in the corridor. Coffee cut with a thread of burning spirit, the smell of the king relaxing. He grinds too fine and he lets it boil, which you're told ruins it, and no one on this earth will ever tell him so. And when I say no one will tell him, I need you to understand what these little rooms are for. This isn't a palace here. This is the one place in France where the machine stops. Upstairs, the man cannot pull off his own shirt without a ceremony that has a printed order of precedence. Down here he pours coffee for himself and for Madame, and, you have seen this too, carries her cup to her, across the room, and sets it down by her embroidery frame, and she says something low, and he laughs. Not the court laugh, a short, real laugh from the chest. The laugh of a heavy, tired, frightened man, because he is frightened, of God mostly, and of boredom, which for him is nearly the same thing, being for 1 hour unwatched, except that he is watched. He is watched by Duhose, sitting in the window bay with the needlework she never seems to finish, and he is watched by you, dusting porcelain you have already dusted, and neither of you counts as watching. Cats or dogs? You remember. The words come and sit beside you every evening now. Here is the thing you must get straight, though, because in Paris they still sing songs about it, and every song is wrong, and the truth of it is stranger and better and sadder than the songs. Madame de Pompadour is not the king's mistress, not any more. Whatever there was of that, and there was, everyone knows there was, it is how this whole apartment came to exist, ended years ago, quietly, the way a fire goes out in a big room without anyone noticing the moment it happens. What is left is the thing the court cannot find a word for, because the court has 40 words for mistress, and none at all for this. A friend. A working friend. His minister without portfolio and without office. His physician for the disease of being Louis. The one person whose room he can sit in without being France. You can put a date on the change becoming official, and the date is real. The 8th of February, 1756, when the Queen, mind you, accepted Madame as a lady of her own palace, a Dame du Palais, the most respectable appointment a woman can hold at this court. The devout party choked on it. Paris made its jokes. But you saw what it looked like from the wrong side of the doors, which is to say from the true side. Madame came back from the ceremony with her eyes wet, and stood in the middle of the wardrobe while you and Duhose unpinned her, and said to the mirror more than to anyone, "Now let them talk." And then she coughed for a while, and then she asked for her account books. That is the whole scandal seen from up close. a woman of 34 who has fought her way to being allowed to be respectable, and a queen who was tired of fighting and account books. The king has his own separate arrangements in a small house in the town. Every servant knows it and no servant says it, and that is every word I will spend on the matter tonight, because it is another night's story and it was never allowed to cross the sill of these 4 rooms. What crosses the sill instead, at 6 o'clock most evenings, down the little staircase with the creak you now know like a voice, is work. That is the secret the songs will never believe. He comes down with papers, dispatches, drafts, lists of names for commands as embassies, and he spreads them on her table among the porcelain, and she reads. She reads fast, the way tradesmen's daughters read. She was one, whatever they have gilded her into since, and she remembers everything, and she's not clever at him, ever. She's clever for him, which is a different art entirely, and the rarest one at this court. You have stood with the coffee tray while the 2 of them sat with their heads bent over a map of Bohemia, like a draper and his wife over the winter orders. That is the second greatest power in France. It looks like bookkeeping. It smells of coffee and lamp spirit. And the whole vast palace above you would trade its gold to see what you see every week, and are paid 12 livres and 10 sous a month to forget. You do not forget. You write it in the book in the lace pillow. Tuesday. He came down at 6 with the leather portfolio, made the coffee too fine again. Em read to him, and he sat with his eyes shut. They spoke of Saxony. She laughed once, he twice. Gone by 9, stair creaking. Mimi has stolen a quill. Saxony. Hold that word. It is the autumn's word, and it is about to swallow the world you're standing in. Because there is a war beginning, and you have been listening to it arrive all year through a closed door, the way you listen to weather. In January, word came that England and Prussia had signed a convention at Westminster, a paper handshake between the sea-wolf and the land-wolf, and the whole delicate architecture of Europe's friendships shivered. In May, France answered with a thing nobody's grandfather would have believed, a treaty with Austria. With Austria. The enemy of 200 years, the house every French soldier's son is raised to curse, signed as a friend at Versailles on the 1st of May 1756, and half the negotiation of that impossible marriage was midwifed by men of Madame's own circle, the Abbé de Bernis foremost, a round, soft-faced, flower-writing little abbé whom Paris used to mock for his verses, and who now carries half the peace of Europe in his portfolio. He's in these rooms constantly. He smells of orange flower pastilles. He is kind to servants in an absent, purring way, and he looks, this autumn, like a man who has bought a horse and discovered it is a lion. In June came the news from Minorca. The Maréchal de Richelieu had taken the English island fort, an actual French victory over the actual English navy, and for a week the palace was insufferable with singing. The English, being the English, responded by court-martialling their own admiral, and then, at the very end of August, the 29th, the couriers' dust still on their boots when the word ran down the corridors, Frederick of Prussia, without declaration, without pretext that would stand up in a tavern, let alone a chancery, marched his army into Saxony, into a peaceful neighbouring country, seized Dresden, penned the little Saxon army in its camp at Pirna, and starved it, by mid-October, into surrender. The Queen of France is a Polish king's daughter. The Dauphine is a Saxon king's daughter. The outrage in this palace was personal, family outrage, the outrage of relatives. And underneath the outrage, in the little rooms where you dust something colder, the understanding spreading like water under a door that the Treaty of May now had teeth in it, that France was bound, that the armies would march in spring, and that the war would be enormous. You feel a war arrive below stairs before the gazettes have finished clearing their throat. Couriers at strange hours, their spurs heard through 2 floors, the leather portfolio coming down the little staircase thicker each week. Bernice's pastille smell in the morning room at hours when no visits are paid. And Madame at her table past midnight. You know, because the candle stubs from her room come up shorter and shorter, burn down to thumbnails, and Nicole, grading them, holds one up and says she's not sleeping, and drops it in the basket with the air of a woman reading a fever off a glass. That is the same autumn you begin to understand the money, because Monsieur Collin begins, for the first time in your service, to look frightened. Sit with the arithmetic a moment. It will not bite you, and nobody sleeps to numbers, but numbers are how this palace feels fear. Madame's establishment costs, all found, households, houses, building, porcelain, charity, everything. Something on the order of a great nobleman's whole income every single year, and it runs, has always run, ahead of what comes in. There are debts to tradesmen in Paris that are older than your service, and a war is a pit that eats money before it eats men. The king's treasury, which pays for all of this, must now also pay 300,000 soldiers, and everyone who lives on the king's purse, which is everyone you have ever met, does the same quiet sum in their heads. Colin does it out loud almost, stooping over his ledgers in the little office that smells of ink and sand, muttering totals, and one evening in November you bring him his candle, and he is sitting with his spectacles pushed up on his forehead and his palms flat on an open book, and he says to the page, not to you, she has ordered the pensions paid first, before the builders, before the silk merchants, the pensions are the servants' pensions, the retired ones, the widows of the household, the old porter with the shaking hands, who was kept on the books after he could no longer lift a bar. When the money tightens, Madame's standing order is that those little lifelines are paid before anything with marble in it. You will hear a great deal in the centuries to come about this woman's extravagance, and most of it will be true. Put this beside it, from the wrong side of the doors, where the ledgers live. Nobody who scrubbed her floors ever missed a pension so that a facade could be finished. Colin says it is bad bookkeeping. He says it every quarter. He pays them first every quarter, and his ink-stained knuckle taps the column twice, like a man touching wood. And she gives dowries. This you have seen with your own eyes, because in October it was a girl you know, one of the laundry girls under your aunt, a quick, freckled creature who was to marry a saddler in the town and whose family could scrape together linen and goodwill and nothing else. Word of it reached Duosset, and Duosset, folding towels, mentioned it to Madame in 6 words, the way she mentions things. No plea in it, just information, like the weather. And Madame at her writing table, without looking up from her letter, said, 300 livres, and tell Colin it is not to be talked of. 300 livres, 2 years of your wages moved by 6 words and a nod on a Tuesday between sentences of a letter to a duke. The girl wept into the pressing table. Your aunt, the hardest pair of hands in the laundries, wrote to you that Madame was a good mistress, underlined, which from your aunt is practically a love letter. And it was not to be talked of, and so, and naturally by Sunday, the whole below stairs of the wing knew, and the knowing of it is a kind of warmth that comes off the household all winter. the way heat comes off a wall that got the sun all day. I want you to hold both of those things at once, because the court cannot, and the pamphlets cannot, and history mostly will not. The debts and the dowries, the porcelain that costs a street's wages, and the pensions paid first. People are not ledgers. They do not balance. She does not balance. You are 19, and you are learning, on your knees with a squirrel hairbrush, the thing that will make your book worth reading if it is ever read, which God forbid, that the truth about a human being is nearly always a sentence with an "and in the middle," where the songs only ever have room for an "or." The cough is worse this autumn. That is the other thing the songs don't know. You hear it through doors, which is how you hear everything. At night, 2 rooms away, a small, dry, patient cough, over and over, like someone sweeping the same corner of a floor for an hour. Duosset is up with the syrup. Dr. Quesnay comes down his twisting stair in a dressing gown with his flat farmer's face on and stays till 2. In the morning the rouge goes on over the grey and the machine engages and the Marquise de Pompadour is presented to the world, freshly enamelled, and only the wardrobe knows that the handkerchiefs are counted now. You count them. That is a thing you do this winter. You count handkerchiefs, and you do not count aloud, and once, in early December, taking the linen bag down before dawn, you see what you see, which is a spot on cambric the colour of old rust, and you stand in the cold corridor holding the bag and feeling the whole palace above you like a weight on a rib, and then you carry it onto the laundry, because that is your work, and some things are not yours to know, even when you know them. Regimen, the doctors call what they do to her. She's put on milk diets and taken off them. She's to ride, then forbidden to ride. She's to take the air, then the air is suspected. Quesnay, who of all the men on the medical staff actually looks at her, rather than at his own reputation, is the least fooled and the most gentle. You have heard him, through the famous hand's breadth of open door, tell her in his flat voice that what she needs cannot be got from an apothecary, and her answer, light and fast as a shuttlecock going back, "Then, doctor, we must hope the apothecary never finds out, or he will charge for it." Laughter, hers, then his, reluctant, snorted. Then the cough. That is her all over, and Duhosset's pages will say so to strangers half a century from now, the wit going out ahead of her like a link boy's torch, and the tiredness coming along behind with the baggage. Once, you wrote it in the book the same night, and your hand shook, in anger, you think, though you have never been sure at what. Once, on an evening when the salon had been full and brilliant and had emptied late, and Duhosset was letting down her hair, Madame looked at herself in the glass, at the famous face with the paint tired on it, and said, in a voice you were not meant to hear, and were of course in the room to hear, being furniture, "My life is like the Christians, a perpetual combat." Duhosset went on drawing the brush down stroke after stroke and said nothing, because there was nothing, and wrote it down after because there was that. And the year turned toward Christmas, with a war coming in the spring the way winter itself comes, certainly impersonally according to the calendar, and none of you, not one soul in the 4 rooms, knew that the terrible thing of that winter would not come from Prussia at all. It was already in the palace. It had been standing in the crowds for days, in a brown coat, watching the doors. But that is January's business, and we are not through December yet. And December, that year, was almost sweet. Sweet because of the porcelain, partly. This is the year the manufactory finished its move. The whole works, kilns and painters and secret keepers and all, carried out of the old donjon at Vincennes and installed in a great new building at Sèvres on the Paris road, on the hill below Madame's own château of Bellevue. And if you think that placement is a coincidence, you have not been paying attention to how this woman does things. The porcelain works are her cause, not a hobby. A cause argued the way ministers argue for fleets. France sends rivers of silver out of the kingdom every year for porcelain from Saxony. Saxony, of all places on God's earth, Frederick's own doorstep, and Madame's position, stated at supper tables until powerful men gave way, is that French earth and French hands can do it better, and that spending on beauty at home is not spending at all but planting. She's supposed to have said, and I give it to you as the court gave it, a sentence passed hand to hand like a coin, wording not under oath, that not to buy this porcelain while one has money to buy it is to be a bad citizen. Whether or not her lips ever made exactly that sentence, her whole life made it daily. The apartment fills all December with straw-packed crates, and the crates breathe out the smell of straw and kiln dust into the warm rooms, and you kneel with doucet, lifting out cups the colour of a June sky wrapped in tissue like relics, and here your own small ghost walks in quietly, the way ghosts do. Because you know that smell of kiln dust, and you know the words seconds and spoiled in a clerk's tired hand. They are in the front of your book, the 30 ruled pages before your life begins, dates and glaze numbers from the works themselves, some inspector of flawed things who gave up his register when the wire-lined paper spoiled with damp. You sit in the garret that night with the book on your knees, and you run your finger down his columns. Spoiled, spoiled, seconds, spoiled. And then you turn the page to your own small hand, and it comes to you, simple as a bell, that the two halves of the book belong together after all. His pages are the account of what the fire ruined. Yours are the account of what the fire missed. You write that down too, and then you feel embarrassed at yourself for writing it, and you do not cross it out. Christmas below stairs is real in a way the gilded floors above cannot manage. There is a midnight mass in the chapel where, for once, the household stands inside the same walls as the masters, even if it is packed at the back in the cold under the organ, and the organ of the chapel royal comes down on you from above like weather, like the ceiling opening, and Nicole beside you, who talks the way other people breathe, does not talk. There is a goose in the servants' hall, one goose among many mouths, but a goose. There is a bottle passed. The sniffing footman sniffs, is mocked for it, laughs at himself for the first time in your memory, and confides to the table, this is his whole mystery, surrendered at Christmas, that he took snuff for 20 years and gave it up when he entered Madame's service because she cannot abide the smell on her linens, and his nose has been in mourning ever since. 20 years of snuff given up for a place. Everyone at the table nods. Every person there has cut some such thing off themselves at the door of this palace and left it outside like a wet coat. And there is the evening. Mark it, because you will keep it the rest of your life, when Monsieur de Marigny comes. He comes 2 days after Christmas, stamping snow, bringing his sister a little painting he will not let the footman carry, and because the evening is quiet and the king is hunting, the brother and sister sit by the fire in the small white and gold room with the door on its hand's breadth, and you and Du José keep the far corner with the mending, and you hear it again, the sound you heard once in autumn, laughter out of a Paris parlour of 20 years gone. He calls her a name from that parlour, not marquise, not madame, a soft old family syllable you do not allow yourself to keep, even in the book. They talk about their dead mother. They talk about a supper in the Rue de Cléry when she was 9 and sang for the guests standing on a chair. He says, "You were unbearable." She says, "I am told I still am." And the fire snaps, and Mimi, the traitor, abandons her cushion to sit on the hem of Marigny's coat, because Mimi has always known where the plainest kindness in any room is sitting. And then the laughter runs out, the way a music box runs out, and in the new quiet the brother says, low, believing no one hears, but the room hears. The room always hears. I wish to God we'd stayed what we were. And she does not answer for so long that you risk raising your eyes, and she is looking into the fire, and her face, firelit, unpainted this late, is the face from 9:30 in the morning, and she says, "No, you don't, Abel. You wish it had cost less." That too goes into the book. Sometimes you are ashamed of the book. You write anyway. You've stopped pretending you know the difference between witness and thief. You only know which one a cat is called, and which one a girl with paper is called if she is caught. On New Year's Day come the étrennes, the year gifts, the old custom nobody at Versailles would dare skip. The household files through, and there is a coin for every servant of the establishment, and for the wardrobe women a length of stuff besides, and when your turn comes, Madame is standing wrapped against the cold that gets even into these rooms, and she puts the coin in your hand herself, and then holds your hand 1 second longer. Your rough hand in her famous one, and hers, you feel with a shock you will never quite get over, is the colder, and says, "Duhauset tells me you mend so that not even the lace remembers it was torn. That is a gift, child. The good God gives out very few of them. Keep your eyes as sharp and your mouth as shut, and you will die old and rich, which at this court is a miracle on the order of loaves and fishes. 61 words. You counted them afterward, lying awake. 61 words from the second greatest power in France, addressed to you, about you, containing, you turn it over for a week before you see it, containing, folded very small inside the compliment, the entire law of your life and hers. Be invisible, be perfect, survive. Keep your mouth shut, says the woman the whole world talks about. You are furniture that breathes, and the most famous woman in Europe just told you in effect that she is too. Hers is just a grander chair, nearer the fire, easier to burn. The 4th of January 1757 is a Tuesday, and it gives you nothing to write. You write it anyway, because a diary that only keeps allowed days is a liar. Tuesday, hard frost. The fountains dumb, ice in the basins, mended the flounce of the grey velvet. M. Lowe would not drive out. The king did not come down. Gone to Trin tomorrow, they say. Nicole's basket full. Salon crowded these 3 nights. All the world wanting news of the war before there is a war to want news of. My hands ache with the cold. The palace is the same as yesterday. I suppose it will be the same tomorrow. You blow out your candle end. Above you, 5 floors of stone and gilt and sleeping ambition settle and tick in the frost. Somewhere under that same roof line, in some corridor's borrowed warmth, a tall man from Arras in a brown coat is spending his 3rd or 4th night on a bench, unremarked, one face among the hundreds that drift through this most public of palaces, where any decently dressed stranger may wander and warm himself and watch. He has been asking odd questions of the servants he falls in with, whether the king is loved, whether the great are cruel. His name is Robert Francois Damiens. He's been a servant himself for 20 years, in and out of great houses, polishing other men's floors, standing on the wrong side of other men's doors. He is, God help everyone, one of yours, below stairs bred and below stairs broken, and in the lining of his coat there is a folding knife with 2 blades, and tomorrow in the dark of the afternoon he will use the shorter one, and nothing in this story will ever be the same again. You sleep. It is the last night of the old world, and it is given to you, like most last nights, entirely unlabelled. The 5th of January is colder still. All day the palace has the muffled, held-breath quality of deep frost. Sounds arrive, small and separate. A shovel somewhere, a door, 1 dog. The king has been upstairs in the Dauphin's apartment. His daughter-in-law's family drowned in Frederick's War. There is much to say. And towards 6 in the evening he comes down the great stair into the black courtyard to take his carriage for Trianon. Torches out, guards in their lines, the little knot of courtiers seeing him off with their breath steaming. You are nowhere near any of that. I want this exact. You are in the wardrobe, on the wrong side of the doors, kneeling at the bottom drawer of the 3rd press with a candle and a sleeve in your hand. And what you hear first is not a shot, and not a scream, because there is no shot, and the screaming starts too far away. What you hear first is running. Overhead, then in the walls, men taking service stairs 3 at a time, a thing that is never done. And then the whole vast building does something you have never heard it do in 3 years. It changes key. The murmur that lives in the stone of Versailles, 10,000 voices at their ordinary distance, all day, every day, so constant you stopped hearing it your first month. That murmur stops and restarts higher. Duosset comes through the room fast, not running. She has never once run, but moving the way water moves when the sluice is opened, and she says 4 words to you in passing, in the flat, calm voice, and they are, "Bar the far door." And she is gone, toward Madame's chamber, and you bar the far door, and then you stand in the middle of your country of walnut presses with your heart going like a fist on a table, and the candle shaking light all over the silks, knowing nothing in the first hour of the famous night, of which 50 years later printed pages will calmly relate everything. What has happened, out in the cold, in the time it takes to walk down a staircase, is this. A tall man in a brown coat has stepped out of the crowd of spectators, past the guards, whom no one thought to make a wall of because who harms the King of France at his own door, has pushed between the Dauphin and the Duke Diane, has struck the king 1 blow with a small knife under the right ribs, and has stepped back and has not run. He stands there, hat on, which in the flare of the torches is its own enormity. The king puts his hand to his side and finds blood and says, "Witnesses will swear to it at the trial, it is in the record. Someone has touched me." And then, seeing the man simply standing, arrest him, but let no one hurt him. Then they carry the king back up the marble stairs he came down, bleeding through his shirt into the fur, convinced with every step that he is a dead man. He is not a dead man. Understand that now, tonight, sooner than anyone in the palace was allowed to understand it then. The blade was short, the January coats were thick, fur over velvet, over wool, over linen, the whole padded armour of a man who feels the cold, and the wound between the 4th and 5th ribs is 2 inches of cut in a fleshy place, missing everything that matters. Dr. Kenny will say it out loud within days, in Madame's own room in the flat farmer's voice, and Duosset will write the words down. It is nothing. If it were anyone else, he might go to a ball. Remember that sentence. It is the most important sentence of the winter, and the entire tragedy of the next 3 weeks is that only the wound believed it. Because the king believes he is dying. He believed it in the courtyard, and he goes on believing it upstairs, where they have laid him on a mattress and found the cut small and the bleeding stopped, and no surgeon's assurance can touch the real wound, which is 30 years deep and has a priest's voice. A subject has raised his hand against the Lord's anointed. Therefore God has permitted it, therefore God is speaking, and what he is saying is the state of Louis's soul. The king calls for confessors the way other men call for wine, and a king making his peace with God at this court must make it publicly with his sins, and every person at Versailles, from the Dauphin down to the boy who feeds the fires, can name the sin with an apartment on the ground floor. By 8 o'clock the palace knows everything and nothing. The king is dead. The king is saved, the knife was poisoned, the Jesuits, the English, the Jansenists. By 9 the courtiers are pouring back from Paris through the frost, and the Well de Boeuf is packed like a fair, and the corridors around the staterooms are a single standing crowd that will not go home for days. And down in the 4 rooms the lights are lit, and nobody comes. I need you to live in that apartment through what comes next. Because everything the story of this woman has been building, the paint and the discipline, the ledgers and the little staircase, the basket of candle ends, all of it is about to be weighed on one scale, in public, in the cold. Madame does not faint, whatever the songs will say. What she does, when Duosset tells her, is stand perfectly still in the middle of the room for the length of 10 heartbeats. You are holding her evening shawl. You count them against your own. And then she says in a voice you've never heard her use, small and exact, like a woman stepping on ice, "Is the wound mortal?" And nobody in the room can answer, and that no answer is the floor of the world giving way. The man she has served and managed and loved in whatever shape that word finally took, he is 1 flight of stairs above her, possibly dying, and she cannot go to him. Take that in. The second greatest power in France cannot walk up 1 staircase. The sick room belongs to the family, to the Dauphin, to the priests, to the party that has prayed for 11 years for exactly this arithmetic. The king's terror on one side, and on the other, everything she is. If she is seen so much as standing at that door, it costs him scandal at the hour of what he believes is his death. And so she stands at the bottom of the little staircase, looking up into the dark of it, and listens and comes away, and sits and stands and asks Duosset the same question at intervals all night, the way the sick ask what time it is. The first day, the friends still come. Bernice, grey as his own powder, sits with her for hours. Quenet goes up and down the twisting stair between the 2 invalids, for she is one now too, coughing in hard fits between visitors, eating nothing. And it is on the 2nd or 3rd such trip that he says his sentence about the ball, and around that sentence the room breathes for 1 hour. Then the news of the evening kills it again. The king has made his confession. Long closeted, priests in and out, and every soul in the apartment knows what a royal confession must promise, because it has happened before, at Metz, in 44. The last time this king thought he was dying, they made him renounce and disgrace his mistress before they would give him absolution, read the renunciation to the whole country from pulpits, and when he recovered he was so ashamed he barely came back to Versailles for a season. Metz. The old ones below stairs say the word like a date on a tomb. Now it is Metz again, with a knife in it. And now, watch the basket. I told you to keep your eye on the basket. On the 6th of January the salon is full, packed even, the curious pressing in on the pretence of sympathy, and the sconces blaze, and Nicole's basket next morning is heavy. On the 8th, the visits thin. Men who came twice a day come once, sit shorter, sit nearer the door. By the 10th, the little gallery of an evening holds a dozen where 100 stood, and the servants begin to snuff the unneeded candles early, and Nicole grades her stubs in the garret without a single word, which from Nicole is the sound of catastrophe itself. By the middle of the month the rooms are so quiet you can hear the fountain's ice crack in the gardens at night, and the basket, the famous basket, the barometer, comes up to the garret light. Light as summer, lighter, wax does not lie. The court has smelled the turning of the season, and the court is wintering elsewhere, at the rising sun, in the Dauphin's antechamber, and the proof of it is that you could carry everything burned in Madame de Pompadour's salon these nights in your two-cupped hands. The sniffing footman goes on the 17th, asks for his papers, cool as you please. A man must think of his future. Others follow, a page, 2 kitchen men, one of the sedan porters. Rats, says Nicole, watching the porter's back going away down the service corridor. And then, with the terrible fairness of the poor, rats with children to feed. The apartment grows so still that Mimi patrols it whining, room after empty room, looking for the crowd that has always been her weather. And it is Marigny, daily now, snow or no snow, the only visitor whose coming has nothing to do with the odds. Marigny picks the little dog up in one big bourgeois hand and carries her about on his arm like a loaf, and says to his sister, in the hearing of the room, "Paris is laying bets on you. I put down money." She almost smiles. Almost. "On what?" she says. "On you," he says. There is no "on what?" And Michaud comes. This you see, because you are in the far corner of the white and gold room that evening, invisible, mending. There is always mending. The world may end, but the flounce is still torn from the packing that has already, quietly, begun. Michaud d'Arnouville, keeper of the seals, her own man, the minister her favour made, 15 years of alliance, the nearest thing to a friend a politician has. He is closeted with her a long half-hour, low voices, and you cannot hear the words, but you can hear the shape of them, and the shape is a door closing. When he goes out past you, his face is arranged and grave, and, underneath the arrangement, relieved, and you will spend years deciding what you saw in it. What he has told her, it will all come out. It all comes out. Is that the king's confessors have won, that her dismissal is resolved on, that for her own dignity she should go before she is sent, the friend advising the fall. Within the hour the order goes to Colin, and the packing, real packing now, begins around you. The straw, the crates, the same straw, the same crates that brought the June sky porcelain in at Christmas. You would like to tell someone that, but there is no one to tell. And Madame in the middle of it, upright, giving quiet directions about which pictures go and which stay, with her face like the mend you were taught to make, perfectly smooth and holding and costing everything. Into which, on an evening in the 3rd week of January, walks the Maréchal de Mirepoix, the little Maréchal, tiny, bright-eyed, unfrightened, one of the very few who has come every single day. And she stops in the doorway among the crates with her muff still on, and she looks at the straw and the corded trunks, and she says the sentence that Doucet heard and wrote and saved for you across half a century, 11 words that are the whole science of courts in a nutshell. Qui quitte la partie, la perd. Whoever leaves the game, loses it. Your packers, she says, taking off her muff, are unpacking your credit, madame. The moment your back is seen, it will be shot at. Stay, sit down, be at home. And madame stands a long moment among her crated pictures, and then she tells Colin to stop the packing. Not to unpack, to stop. A woman keeping both doors open. But she stays and she sits, and she is at home, upright, painted, correct, every terrible evening, to a salon of 6 people and a dog. And if you want to know what courage looks like from the wrong side of the doors, it is not the man in the brown coat standing still with his hat on. It is a consumptive woman of 35. The birthday came and went on the 29th of December, days before the knife, and nobody would ever again think of that winter as containing one. Dressing every day for a court that has already buried her, and taking pains with the rouge. Below stairs, that same 3rd week, the police come. They have Damien's. They have had him since the first minute, but they are hunting a plot the length and breadth of the kingdom. Arrests in Paris, questions everywhere, and at Versailles a slow combing of everyone whose duties touch the courts and doors. And one afternoon it is your wing's turn, and a commissaire with cold reddened ears sits in the steward's room with a clerk beside him, and you stand in front of the table in your apron for 6 minutes, while he asks you the questions he has asked 200 servants already. Did you see a tall man in a brown coat? Did anyone question you about the king's habits, his hours, his doors? You answer no, monsieur, and no, monsieur, and it is true, and your voice stays level, and the whole time, the entire time, one thought is standing at the back of your skull like a person. The book. Because they are searching where they please, chests and palliaces, not from suspicion but from thoroughness, and a servant's room has no locks the crown respects. And that evening you climb the 5 flights with your legs made of string, and the garret door is ajar, and your straw mattress is shifted on its boards, and Nicole's box has been gone through and left admirably tidy, which is worse than ransacked, and the lace pillow sits on its shelf exactly where it sat, fat, dumpy, innocent. A tool of trade among tools of trade, its bobbins hanging in their proper fan. No searcher who is not herself a lace-maker has ever found a grandmother's pocket. You hold the pillow on your lap that night like a child, and you think, for the first time with the front of your mind, the thought that Doucet has carried lightly and daily for years, the true weight of a servant's page. Paper remembers what the great deny. Yes, and paper, found, is a rope. Both things, an and, not an or. You do not burn the book. You came within 1 candle flame of it. You sat there with the cover open and the flame close enough to warm the paper. And you do not. And if you ever fully understand why, you will be older than this story. Then, at the end of January, the weather of the world turns in a single evening, and it turns on the creak of a stair. You are in the wardrobe corridor when you hear it. Your corridor, your ceiling, the exact board you have known since the first morning of this story. And your head comes up like a deer's. A step. Another. Slow. Heavy. A big man coming down carefully, and no valet's tread before or after him. Doucet is already at the chamber door. She has heard it too. The whole apartment has heard it, the way a dry field hears rain. And the little door opens, and it is the king, thinner, yellowish, wrapped in a dressing gown, 10 days of terror and priests and mortified silence hanging on him like wet clothes. the wound long closed, the shame still draining, and he stands in the doorway of her room looking at her, and nobody moves. And then Madame, who has risen, sinks into the reverence, and he crosses the room and raises her out of it himself, both hands. The door is closed then, properly, and what was said behind it neither you nor Duhaussel nor the printed pages will ever tell, because for once nothing was heard. What is known, what all Versailles knows by midnight, by that soundless system of bells no one has ever found the wires of, is that the King of France came down the little staircase and stayed 2 hours, and went up again looking, said the boy who carried the lights before him, like a man walking out of church. And the next evening he comes down at 6 with the leather portfolio, and the spirit lamp is lit, and through the hand's breadth of open door you hear the grinder turn, 2-fingered, too fine, and you stand in the cold corridor with clean linen over your arm and find your own face wet, and have the sense not to examine why. On the 1st of February the palace wakes to find the world set the right way up and nailed there. Machaut, the friend who advised the fall, is dismissed, stripped of the seals, ordered to his estates. D'Argenson, the war minister, her oldest enemy in the councils, dismissed the same morning, exiled to his chateau. Both notes in the king's own hand. Versailles reads the lesson before its morning chocolate, and the lesson is, the lady stays. Place your bets accordingly. Bets are placed. By the 4th of February the little gallery is full again. Full to the doors, full of the same faces that vanished a month ago, wearing the same smiles at the same angles, pressing the same sympathy now with the polish reversed, and the sconces blaze until 1 in the morning. And Nicole comes up the 5 flights with the basket on her hip, so heavy she's laughing, angrily both at once, and she sets it down on the garret floor between you like a hunted thing, and the two of you look at it, the wax fat and golden in the rushlight, a full harvest of other people's cowardice, and Nicole says, "Never tell me again what anyone at this court believes. Weigh them." The sniffing footman is back by Lent. He stands at the service door with his hat in his hands and his nose in mourning, and does not quite meet anyone's eye. And Madame, who is told everything, who forgets nothing, who is supposed by all of Paris to be vengeance in petticoats, has him taken on again at the old wage, and the only sentence anyone hears her spend on the entire episode is to Duhaussel, "Evening, hair coming down, they came back." Note it, Haussé, not for spite, for navigation. Duhaussel noted it. So, 5 floors up by a candle end, in a book that smells of straw and kiln dust, did somebody else. As for the man in the brown coat, the trial ground on in Paris through the winter, and at the end of March they did to Robert François Damiens, before an immense crowd on the Place de Grève, the full and ancient horror the law of France reserved for those who raise a hand against the king, the death they had not used in 147 years, the one you have heard of. I am not going to walk you through that square tonight. This is a story about sleep, and besides, it is the plain truth of the record that the household did not go and did not speak of it. What I will give you instead is the one detail that belongs to these rooms. That evening, the 28th of March, the apartment was very quiet, and Madame kept no salon, and the king did not come down. And Duhauset's pages, which flinch at so little, give that whole immense day a handful of lines and turn away. And in the garret a girl with a book on her knees sat a long time and finally wrote one sentence. "He was a servant once, and stood where we stand, and I will not write of him again." And she never did. And that, the packing stopped, the stair creaked, the baskets weighed, the page turned, That is the end of the terrible winter, and the story now does what the palace itself did. What you must let your own breathing do. It slows. It survived. You survived. The rest of this night is the long exhale. Spring comes late that year, and comes the way it always comes to Versailles. First in the sound of water. Through February the fountains stood dumb under their lids of ice. Then one morning in March you wake in the grey, and something has changed in the air of the garret. Some pressure gone off the world, and it takes you until the middle of the stairs to name it. Dripping. The whole palace is dripping softly from 1,000 feet of gutter and ledge and frozen pipe. The long thaw beginning, and within a fortnight the gardeners are out on the parterres in lines, and the orange trees come rumbling up on their rollers from the winter orangery like a returning army. 500 trees in white cases, and the smell of them on the first warm evening climbs all the way to your window. You had forgotten. Every year you forget, and every year the orange blossom comes up over the sills of that enormous house like the tide coming in, and for a few weeks the palace of 10,000 smells like one single flower. The gown comes back to you in March, the grey velvet, the one whose flounce was torn in the 3rd week of January in the packing, when a corner of a crate went through it and nobody even exclaimed, because that week a torn flounce was nothing, that week the world was ending. It has hung in the 3rd press ever since, wounded, waiting, and you take it down on a bright cold morning and lay the flounce over the cushion on your knees, and you do the thing you were put on this earth to do. Needle, silk, patience. The way you were taught, the way your mother was taught. You work at it on and off for 3 days, in the good light by the wardrobe window, and when it is done you hold the flounce to the sun and turn it again, and there is nothing. No scar, no pucker, no shadow. The winter never happened, says the velvet, and Madame wears the grey to chapel on Palm Sunday, and Duhaussay, helping her into it, runs one thumb down the flounce, once, exactly over the place. She knows exactly where the place is, and finds nothing, and looks at you across the room for a moment, and that look is the highest honour this story has to give. The mend held. Remember the mend. It is nearly the last thing this story will say to you months from now, at the very edge of sleep. Madame is changed by the winter, and the change settles in through the spring like a stain settling into wood. Not broken, the opposite, and somehow the opposite is sadder. She's graver, steadier. The gaiety that used to come and go across her like weather is rarer now, and what has replaced it is work. Since February the ministers come to her. That is simply understood now, the way the sun's root is understood. Bernie, who carries the foreign portfolio into the council itself that summer. The war men, the money men, whose faces get longer every quarter. The little rooms have become, without any document saying so, one of the offices of France, and the woman the pamphlets still draw as a courtesan spends her afternoons with maps and lists and memoranda, learning the names of Bohemian rivers, arguing supply, placing generals, placing them badly, sometimes history will say, and history will have the right to say it, and you, holding the coffee tray, will only ever be able to answer. I saw a sick woman doing sums at midnight because the men whose work it was brought her the papers and stood there waiting. Both things, and not or. It is the motto of your whole life by now. You hear the war all summer the way you heard it come, through doors. It goes well, then not well. The armies march east. The dispatches come back stiff with names, Hanover, Hastenbeck, victories of a kind, and then, from the North Country in September, A convention signed at a place called Closter 7 that is somehow a victory ruined, a one campaign given back with both hands, and the king's voice through the door has an edge you have not heard since January, and Madame's, answering, is the low, level, evening voice she uses when the thing that is needed is not brilliance but nerve. And upstairs, all through that same summer, Dr. Quesnay's rooms fill and fill with the loud men and their grain. You climb the twisting stair once or twice a week now. The doctor has taken to borrowing you from Duaussay to copy tables, because your hand is small and clean, and you do not ask questions, though God knows you store the answers. And it is the strangest parlour in the palace. No rank kept, wigs off, coffee gone cold in the cups, and grown men, some of them famous, shouting with happiness about turnips, about the price of bread and the freedom of the markets and the single tax, about the idea, you copy it out so many times you could sing it, that all the wealth of kingdoms comes up out of the land, out of tillage, out of the despised mud your father stood in at Amiens, and that the merchants and the courts and the whole gilded apparatus overhead are spenders of it, not makers. The doctor in the middle of it all, flat-voiced, square-faced, drawing his zigzag tables that trace a crown piece from hand to hand through the kingdom like a raindrop traced down a window. Economists, they will be called, the first ones, and the books they are scratching out in that low entresol room over the next few years will be read by every finance minister in Europe for a century. You understand a tenth of it, but you carry the pages, and once, waiting while the ink dries, you say, because he asks you. He actually asks the maid her opinion. No one has ever done that. You say that at home the good year and the bad year were the whole of life, and rent was the sky. And monsieur, the men who talk of land have mostly never carried water to it. And Quesnay looks at you a long moment over the spectacles and says, to the room, memorably, there is more political economy in that apron than in the Sorbonne. Write it down. And somebody laughs, and somebody actually writes it down, and you go back downstairs burning like a lamp and are sensible enough to tell no one but the book. It is that same summer, one Sunday evening in July, that you climb to the roof. Nicole knows the way, of course. Nicole knows every way. There's a ladder from the highest garret to a hatch the roofers use, and the two of you go up it in your stocking feet with your shoes in your hands, sworn to 5 minutes, and come out into the last of the light on the leads of the north wing, among the forest of chimneys higher than the swifts. And you stand up slowly, holding the warm iron of a chimney stay, and you see it, the whole of it, the thing you live inside and have never once seen, the palace running out below you, wing after wing after wing, roof beyond roof, gold leaf on the balustrades catching the low sun, and then the gardens, dear God. The parterres like embroidery pulled drum tight, the fountains throwing their last water of the evening, the Grand Canal laid down the middle of France like a sword of light, running away flat and shining a full mile to the west, and pointing past its own vanishing point at everything else. The blue woods, the villages, the hayfields of the Ile-de-France going down into the summer haze. The world, the actual world, out of which the bread comes, and the wax and the lace and the girls. Behind you, one town. Before you, a kingdom of 20-some million souls, of whom perhaps 20 have ever stood where you are standing, and of whom almost none will ever know your name. And you find that the thought, which ought to crush, does something else entirely up here in the wind. Below you, under those acres of lead and gold, the whole vast machine is at its endless work. Kings grieving, ministers scheming, Duhaussay writing, Colin summing, Madame coughing, Mimi asleep in a patch of last sun, and every gear of it, every single gear, is turned by hands like the two roughened ones holding this chimney stay. Cats and dogs are you. Furniture that breathes. Maybe. But the furniture carries the house, thinks the girl on the roof, and the cat sees everything in the room, and paper remembers, and somewhere 5 floors down, sewn into a lace pillow from Picardy, there is a book with your seeing in it. You are a mote on the roof of Versailles, but you are here. You are in the machine and of it, one thread of the actual cloth, and no one weaves you out of it now. Nicole, beside you, is silent for a whole minute, which you could sell as a miracle. Then she says, pointing with her chin down the Avenue de Paris, where the road runs off through the town, 3rd Street past the market. That's where the shop will be. You can't see it from here. And you say, you will from the shop, and she looks at you and barks the car laugh, and the Swifts go over screaming, and the two of you climb down again into the dark and the smell of tallow, 5 minutes older, entirely changed. The summer ends. The orange trees rumble back into their winter house. The war, which was going to be over by Christmas, is not going to be over by Christmas. And in the first week of November, a courier comes in from the east so mud-caked that the guards at first won't pass him, and the news he carries goes through the palace like cold water through a tooth, and the name in his satchel, the name nobody at Versailles has ever had to learn how to hear, is Rosbach. The 5th of November, 1757. A French army and its imperial allies, twice the size of the Prussian force in front of them, caught mid-manoeuvre on a rise in Saxony by Frederick's cavalry and broken, not defeated, broken, rolled up and scattered in an afternoon, the whole battle scarcely 90 minutes long, the casualty lists obscenely lopsided, the jokes in the London and Berlin papers already sharpening themselves before the mud on the courier was dry. France has not been laughed at like this in living memory. The palace takes it the way a proud house takes a public slap. First disbelief, then fury hunting for a name to burn. The general, the allies, the ministry, her, always eventually her, the pamphlets know all roads, and underneath the fury, fear, because the money was already failing and now the glory has failed too, and a war that has lost both is a beast that eats years. The king takes it worst of all. He goes grey and silent for days. The suppers stop. The man who was stabbed in January and got up again is put on his back by a battle 300 leagues away. And it is in those evenings, in the little rooms, with the maps pushed aside because there was nothing on them anyone could bear to look at, that Madame does the work history will find hardest to see, and Duhaussay saw nightly. She talks him back onto his feet. Steadiness, distraction, small jokes rationed like syrup, the reading aloud, the coffee, and it is from one of those evenings that the sentence comes. The sentence, the one you may already know without knowing where you know it from. The most quoted words this woman will ever be given, and they are given to her by Duhaussay's pages, and by nothing else on earth. The king sunk in his chair beyond consoling, the ruin of the army in his lap, and Madame, urging him back to life, to work, to supper, saying, lightly, desperately, the shuttlecock going back over the net one more time, that he must not let it kill him, that after them anyway would come the deluge. Après nous, le déluge. Duhaussay heard it and wrote it down, plain, no flourish, a tired woman's remark on a black evening. And half a century later the world would take it up and sharpen it into the epitaph of an entire doomed order. the shrug of the old regime dancing on its own grave. You were in the room, or near enough. The story has earned the right to tell you what the words actually smelled like. They smelled of coffee and lamp spirit and fear held at arm's length. They were not a philosophy. They were a nurse's joke at a sickbed said to make a heartsick man eat something. That is how history is mostly made, and almost never how it is remembered. That winter is hard everywhere. Hard in the fields, hard in the ledgers, hardest in the east where the armies rot in their quarters. And yet the 4 rooms hold. That is the thing about the year after a catastrophe. It is not another catastrophe. It is porridge and mending and small hours. The salon fills and empties with the tides of news. Colin's candle burns later. The pensions are paid first. The silk merchants of Paris write letters that would blister paint and are answered with instalments. Bernice, poor Bernice who wanted peace the way other men want fame, buckles visibly under the portfolio all through 1758. You watch him going out through the wardrobe passage one wet October evening, pastille smell and all, muttering to himself, an unhappy man in a great office. And at the end of that year the resolution everyone has watched forming finally arrives. He is given the Cardinal's red hat in November, and his dismissal in December, sweetness and the door in the same season, which is this court summarized in a single anecdote. And into his place, in December of 1758, comes a man you have seen twice in the little rooms, and will remember all your life because Mimi, the infallible, growled at him both times, the Comte de Stanville, now Duc de Choiseul, quick, ugly, brilliant, red-headed, Madame's own creature's choice, a man who laughs with his whole body and misses nothing whatever. He will run France for the next 12 years. That, though, is beyond our story's edge. For tonight it's enough that you saw the new age walk in through the ordinary door in December of 1758, rubbing its hands against the cold, and that the woman who chose it was the same woman the whole court had buried, in the straw and the crates not 2 years before. December of 1758 gives you one more picture for the book, and it is the strangest and the merriest of the whole 3 years. That month, the dead week after Christmas, the porcelain comes to the palace to be sold. This has begun to be the custom in these very years. The year's finest pieces from Sèvres brought up and laid out in the king's own private apartments, and the court walked past them, and the king himself, this is not a story, or if it is, all Versailles tells it and you have stood outside the doors while it happened, the king playing shopman among his courtiers, naming prices, twitting the reluctant, watching precisely who buys much, who pleads poverty. Because buying is loyalty now. Buying is the war effort in bleu celeste, and a great lord who will not take a garniture of vases at such an hour is making a statement he had better be able to afford. Madame moves through the room in grey and pearls, saying almost nothing, needing to say almost nothing, her manufactory, her cause, her doctrine of French earth and French hands, set out under the chandeliers with the King of France for a counterboy. And you Jose, and you carry the sold pieces down afterward, wrapped, ticketed, and in the service passage you check one ticket against Colin's list, a pair of vases in the new rose colour, and the figure on the ticket is a number your father did not earn in any 10 years of his life, and you carry the crate very, very carefully, and in the garret that night you write, "The whole world upside down." The king keeps a shop and keeps it well. N would approve of his prices, and then, because the book has taught you honesty, and the rose colour is the most beautiful thing I have ever held. Nicole leaves on the 1st of April, 1759. And no, she did not choose the Fool's Day by accident. She chose it, she says, so the whole wing would remember her going. 180 leaves in the stocking by the end. The winter of the full baskets did it, she says, deadpan. Cowardice was very good to me that year. And the lease signed on the 3rd Street past the market, and the Swiss from Fribourg carrying a trunk down 5 flights on one shoulder like a loaf of bread. At the door of the service court she takes your face in both hands, this woman who taught you every corridor of your life and delivers her whole philosophy in one breath. Coffee at the front, ribbons at the back, no stairs, and never sell anything you'd miss. Then she has gone down the avenue in the April light, talking, no doubt, to the Swiss, to the trunk, to the town, to the future, and the shop thrives, by the way. You will drink coffee there on your rest days for years, at the little table by the window kept for her friends from the house, which is what she calls the greatest palace in Europe, the house. And the garret is so quiet that first night that you cannot sleep for it, and the new girl arrives on Thursday. She's 15. From the Bourbonnais, a wool spinner's daughter, hands rough as bark and quick as sparrows, and she cries the first night, face to the wall, exactly the way you did, and you lie in the dark composing and rejecting sentences for a long time. All the wise things 3 years have taught you, the corridors and the doors and the cats and the dogs, and in the end you say what Nicole would have said, the only thing that was ever true on a first night: it gets easier. And she stops crying, roughly forever, and within a month she is teaching you card games and eating her supper like a wolf, and one evening you catch her, mouth open, taper in hand, absolutely still, listening at the wall to the far-off sound of the king's evening violins, and you see yourself 3 years ago so exactly that your chest hurts. Du José takes to sending the girl on the far errands now, and keeping you near. You understand what is happening. It is happening slowly and kindly, the way everything that woman does happens. You are being trained one rung up. It is you who lays out the night things now, you who knows the syrup spoons, you who sits in the window bay of an evening with mending you never quite finish while the coffee is made and the papers are read. You, more and more often, on the right side of the doors, which is to say the wrong one, which is to say the place where the seeing is done. Your wage is raised to 200 livres at midsummer. Colin taps the entry twice with the ink-stained knuckle, like a man touching wood, and says nothing, and from Colin, nothing at all is a wage. The first book, the porcelain clerk's book, The Water-Stained Island, Grandmother's Pocket, fills in the spring of 1759. 140 leaves, 3 years of your one life, the coffee and the creek, the dowry and the rust-coloured spot, 10 heartbeats counted in a doorway in January, the weight of a basket of wax. You wrap it in a piece of oiled silk that once wrapped a lion brocade, and it goes back into the pillow, and its successor, bought honestly this time from a stationer in the town with candle money, a fat plain workman's day book with nothing wrong with it at all, is begun the same night, and somehow, you note, the honest one is harder to write in. It costs more, being no one's salvage. Nothing rescued is ever quite so easy to talk to again, and there we can begin to let the story set you down in the good years, because they were the good years, 1758, 1759, whatever the war was doing. Below stairs, history is not battles. Below stairs, history is whether the pensions were paid and the goose was got and the cough was no worse than last winter, and by that reckoning the house stood firm. You do not yet know, and I will say this once, and gently, because you are nearly asleep. You do not yet know that the war will grind onto a bitter, clipped peace that costs France her forests across the sea, or that the little staircase has fewer years of creaking left than anyone would believe, and that on an April evening in 1764 in rain, this story's lady will leave the palace for the last time, and the doors you spent your life on the wrong side of will stand open all at once and mean nothing at all. The listener knows. The listener always knows that is the sad privilege of the future. The girl in the window bay knows none of it, and is not meant to, and mends her lace by the last of the light with the coffee smell in the room, and the low voices going on and on over the maps, and is, "Write it, girl. It is true, and you are the one soul in the palace placed to see it," is, for this hour, with the lamp ticking and the house held and the winter over, something dangerously close to happy. Let her have the hour. We will not follow the years down all the way. You know now how they go, and this is the part of the night where we let go of dates the way you let go, one by one, of the day's held muscles. But a story built on a real book owes its debts in real coin, and so, softly, with the lamp turned low, here is what the record says became of the real ones. Madame de Pompadour held her strange, unnamed office to the end, friend, minister, target, nurse, through the whole grinding length of that war and just past it, and died at Versailles itself, in her apartment, on the evening of the 15th of April, 1764, of the lungs, as the wardrobe had known for years she would. She was 42. It rained on the day her coffin left for Paris, and the story the court told forever after. A courtier swore he stood beside the king at the window and heard it. And you may weigh a courtier's oath yourself by now. You have had 3 years of practice. Is that Louis watched the little procession go down the avenue into the weather, bareheaded, and said only, "The Marquise has bad weather for her journey." 20 years of history, closed with a remark about rain. The etiquette of that palace had no ceremony for what she'd actually been, and so the man used the only language the place ever taught him. He spoke of the weather and went in from the window, and by all accounts was never entirely warm again. She remembered her people. The will shows it plainly. Legacies down the whole length of the household. Colin among the first named, and to her women, her femme de chambre, provision made, the pensions paid first, one last time, out of the wreck of the most argued about fortune in France. The household scattered as households do, carrying its trained silences off into other services, other towns. The 4 rooms were emptied, reassigned, repainted. Within a few seasons, other furniture stood where the coffee table stood, and the palace, which forgets faster than any creature alive, forgot. Madame d'Orsay did not. She left court and lived on, long, modest, unfamous, a widow from Champagne with a flat, calm voice, well past the fall of the whole world she'd served, and somewhere among her possessions, through all those years and all those removals, travelled a case of papers in a fast, cramped, abbreviating hand. She had kept them. Through the rain, through her service, through every January in which paper was a rope, she had kept them, the way you kept yours, because somewhere below, the level where anyone decides anything, she could not do otherwise. Servants who write are servants who can testify. She never published a line. She simply did not burn them. The burning was left to someone else to nearly do, and here you were promised this at the very beginning of the night, by a fire that had not been lit yet. Here is the fireplace. Picture a winter room in Paris, years on. The Marquis de Marigny, older now, stouter, sadder, the little sister long dead, the king she served dead too, a new young king and a new young court making the old one look like a dream. Marigny's putting his papers in order, which for a man of his position means a servant at the hearth and baskets going into the fire. The accumulated paper of two extraordinary lives, his and hers, letters, accounts, memoranda, the whole combustible sediment of the age, and among it, come to him God knows exactly how, from some trunk, some legacy, some settling of an old servant's effects, a bundle in a cramped abbreviating hand. He knows what it is, or sees enough. Papers of a femme de chambre, kitchenside gossip by the look of it, cat's testimony. Into the basket it goes with the rest, headed for the flames, and a guest is sitting at that fireside, a man of letters named Senac de Melhan, watching the baskets go, and something makes him put out his hand. May I? The shrug. Take it. One shrug between the basket and the fire. Hold your finger and thumb apart the width of that shrug. That is the entire distance between everything you have heard tonight and silence. The coffee and the creak of the stair. It is nothing. He could go to a ball. Who leaves the game, loses it. After us the deluge, as if we were cats or dogs. Every one of those sentences was in the basket. Every one of them passed through one bored, generous, incalculable little movement of a tired man's shoulders, and out the other side into your ears, on this night, in your century, in your bed. The pages were published at last in 1809. Marigny dead, Doucet dead, the king dead, the palace itself half emptied by a revolution none of them lived to be astonished by. And readers who opened that small book found, instead of the scandal they had paid for, something far stranger. The King of France making his own coffee, a sick woman doing sums at midnight, kindness, debts, syrup spoons, fear, the greatest palace on earth described for the first time in history. From the wrong side of the doors, they found the sentence about the cats and the dogs, and it has never stopped being quoted since, because everyone who reads it feels the same small cold shock you felt when it was said over the folded linen, the shock of the furniture speaking, and the girl, our girl, Marie of Amiens, the invisible mender 5 floors up with her grandmother's pillow. You know what I'm going to say, and I promised at the beginning of the night to say it honestly. There was no one Marie. There were hundreds of her. The ledgers of that household are full of her wages and empty of her voice. Whatever each of them saw, whatever any of them wrote or wished she had written or told a granddaughter by a fire in Picardy, history closed over them, quietly, completely, the way water closes. No bundle of theirs was sitting at the right fireside on the right afternoon. That is the whole difference, in the end, between silence and testimony. Not courage, not truth. They had those, but luck. One shrug's worth of luck. Doucet's book survives for all of them. When you hear her flat, calm voice across 2.5 centuries, understand that it is not one woman speaking. It is the corridor. It is every girl who ever sat on a low stool in the cold at 6 a.m, making the damage disappear. The 4 rooms are still there. That is true, and worth taking down into sleep with you. On the ground floor of the Palace of Versailles, under the state apartments, the low warm rooms still open one into another. Visitors file through where the walnut presses stood. Guides point out the space where a spirit lamp once ticked and swayed. The porcelain she fought for sits in glass cases now in the great museums of the world. The June sky blue and the rose they finally named after her, and people lean close to the glass without ever hearing the straw rustle or smelling the kiln dust. The laces in the museums too, Brussels and Alençon and Argentan, pinned flat under glass, labelled lit. And on some of those pieces, if the light is angled right, there are men's, invisible ones, perfect ones. The label never mentions them. The label never mentions her. That is what a perfect mend means. Somebody held the ruin in her lap in the cold by a tallow candle, and made it never have happened, and asked for nothing and got it. Centuries will pass. They have passed already. You're lying in one of them now, listening. The palace you have walked tonight will change beyond recognition, and somehow refuse to change at all. The fountains will play for tourists on a timetable. The little staircases will be walled up, opened, argued over by scholars with measuring tapes. The war that filled the leather portfolio will shrink to 2 lines in a school book. But people will still sit up at night over work they cannot put down, still count what is in the basket and read their fortunes there, still stand on rooftops briefly between one duty and the next and be amazed, still write things down that were never meant to be read, in small hands by bad light, because somewhere below the level where anyone decides anything, we cannot do otherwise. Some things don't change. The wish to leave one line behind us doesn't change. And if some night you stand in those rooms yourself, with the crowd shuffling and the guide's voice carrying, do one small thing for the girl on the stool. Stand a moment by the wall, out of the current of the visitors, over against the panelling where the service door used to be, and be, for 10 heartbeats, on the wrong side of the doors. Count the heartbeats. She would. She counted everything. You will feel it, I promise you. Every palace and every grand house on earth has the same secret architecture. The seen rooms and the unseen passages folded in behind them like the wrong side of embroidery. All knots and crossings and carried threads, everything that makes the smooth picture possible and is never meant to be looked at. You have spent this whole night on the wrong side of the embroidery. You know now what the smooth picture costs. That knowledge is her legacy to you. Hers and Duosset's and every unnamed girl's in every ledger and every archive in Europe. And it weighs nothing, and you may carry it anywhere, and no searcher will ever find it on you. Because here at the end, with your eyes heavy, you can be told the last secret, which you have surely half guessed. You have been below stairs all your life. Nearly everyone has. Nearly everyone who has ever lived has been the mender, and not the wearer, the carrier, and not the carried, the watcher in the window bay, and not the face in the portrait, the one the room talks past, the one the record forgets, the one who keeps 1 line a day in some notebook of the heart that was never meant to be read. The palaces change, the livery changes. The wage is still 12 livres and 10 sous one way or another. The pension is still prayed over. The basket still tells the truth about the human heart quicker than any sermon. And the work, whatever your laces, whatever it is you mend so that not even the cloth remembers it was torn. The work is still, mostly invisible, and still, mostly holds the house up. You know that now. You knew it before tonight. Tonight you only heard it said. It is an old, old company you belong to, the company of the wrong side of the doors, and it is very good company to fall asleep in. The same as it was for her that last Tuesday we saw her, with the frost on the roof. The same as it was for Duosset, in the closet room with the door ajar, listening for the cough. The same as it will be tomorrow, in 100 million houses when the lights go out one by one and the day's damage sits in the work basket, waiting, patient, mendable, the same small courage, lying down, the same trust that the morning will know what to do. So let the palace go now, room by room, the way the candles went. The wardrobe first, the walnut presses sighing shut, the tissue settling over the lace, the drawers breathing out their orange blossom dark. Then the little gallery, the sconces snuffed by a man who no longer takes snuff, going along the wall with his brass cap sniff by sniff, dark by dark. Then the white and gold room, the fire falling to embers, the porcelain flowers holding their colours with nobody to see, Mimi turning 3 times in her basket and down, the coffee table cooling, the grounds settling in the little pot, the last warmth going out of the brass, the spirit lamp out, the leather portfolio closed on Bohemia till morning, the clocks of the staterooms far away overhead, striking to nobody, handing the hour along the empty galleries like a bucket down a line. Above it all, 5 floors of stone going quiet, passage by passage, landing by landing, the held breath of the frost outside, the settling tick of an enormous house with its people folded into it like letters into envelopes, ministers and porters, duchesses and laundry girls, all of them for these few dark hours, breathing at exactly the same speed, which is the one equality that Palace ever managed, and it managed it every single night. Listen to it settle, a beam, somewhere, a shutter, the stair, once, softly, and it is nobody. It is the cold letting go of the wood. You know that sound now. You will never mistake it again. The fountains are dumb under their ice. The gates are shut. Far off in the town, 1 dog, then not even that. And highest of all, under the cold slates, a garret. A 15-year-old asleep with her face to the wall, breathing slow, 1 sparrow-quick hand open on the pillow, done with the day, and a girl of 22 by a candle end, writing her 1 line for the day, and the line is short because a day was good and good days need few words. Mended, carried, nothing lost, all well. Something like that. You may compose it yourself, drifting. It is your line now as much as hers. And she reads it over once, the way she checks a mend, holding it to the light and turning it, and finds no snag in it, and closes the book on the drying ink and slides it home into the place only lace makers know, under the cover, against the straw, where it will be safe until morning, safe for years, safe for as long as this story needs it to be. And she blows the candle out, carefully, carefully, because the stub is money, because everything here is something, because that is the first lesson and the last one, and lies back on the straw that has learned her shape, and pulls the blanket to her chin, and hears, far below, through 5 floors of sleeping stone fainter than memory, fainter than the frost, the last door of the palace close. You are warm enough, you are fed enough, you are safe enough. You have a bed that knows you, and a day's work behind you that held, and a page with 1 true line on it. That is more than most of the Palace of Versailles could say on its best night. That's enough. It was enough for her, and she had cold ankles and 150 livres a year, and tonight, for this 1 night, her enough can be yours. Tomorrow there will be linen to count. Tomorrow there will be lace to mend, and stairs to climb, and doors to stand on the wrong side of. Tomorrow the bells before light, and the felt slippers on the cold stone, and the candle that must be made to last. Tomorrow the chocolate coming in, and the shutters folding back, and the first carriages in the courtyard. Tomorrow the whole warm machine turning over once more, the way it turned the day before you were born. the way it will turn long after everyone in this story has become a name in a ledger, and then not even that. But that's tomorrow. Tomorrow belongs to the bells, and the bells are asleep. Tomorrow will come soon enough, and it will find the mend holding and the book hidden and the household breathing, and it will need you rested. For now there is just this, the dark, the quiet, the weight of the blanket, the slow tide of your own breath going out and coming in, out and in, unhurried, uncounted, nobody's to inspect, nobody's to hurry. The one possession at Versailles that was ever entirely your own. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took her. 5 floors up under the slates, with the frost ticking on the roof of the greatest palace in the world. Let the corridors go dark. Let the voices fade, the king's, the marquise's, the flat calm voice over the folded linen. Let them sink back into the pages where a shrug saved them. Safe now, kept now, needing nothing more from you tonight. Let the needle rest. Let the mend hold. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest. Take it. And dream, if you dream at all, of small rooms and warm light, of coffee ground too fine by a king, of a fat linen pillow with a secret it kept for 30 years, of one line of ink drying in a garret, high over the sleeping gardens of Versailles, while the whole vast house breathes slowly in the dark, and history, patient, forgetful, occasionally miraculously kind, turns over in its sleep and lets the small voices through. Good night.